Hello, my name is Peter Abbott and thank you for taking the time to come and have a look at this overview of the course Take Control of Your Mental Wellbeing. I'm the writer and producer of the course, and the reason that this was put together was from a demand from a lot of my clients who wanted a course that focused on a much more proactive approach to their employees, thinking about how they might look after their mental health and their mental well-being. So with that, I went away and researched the topic into a lot of depth and came up with this course and this course content, which runs over 3.5 hours and can be delivered either face-to-face or online. Before I make a start on the overview, I'll give you a bit more background information about myself. So I've been working in the mental health sector and the mental wellbeing sector now, delivering training and consulting for nearly 15 years. Prior to that, I worked in senior roles in both project management and operations. I'm also an accredited instructor for Mental Health First Aid England, so I'm licensed to deliver all of their adult courses, one of which includes the world-renowned Mental Health First Aid course. I'm also an accredited instructor partner with an organisation called Thrive, and I'm licensed to deliver their Awareness Champion and Managers course that looks into supporting neurodiversity in the workplace, and in particular those people that are neurodifferent or neurodivergent. I also collaborate with a group of wonderful organisations delivering training and consulting and writing courses for them on occasions as well. And those include Manchester Mind, Workplace Mindfulness, Co-Action for Health in the Workplace and First Response Training. So, let's have a look at what we're going to discuss today in this session. So the session should take around about 20 minutes in length, and we're going to have a look at these topics that we've got here showing on the screen at the moment. First of all, we're going to have a look at this topic or phrase known as psychoeducation. You may well have started to hear this, or you may well have started to see this start to be used in the area of well-being, in particular when they talk about a proactive approach to looking after your well-being. So I'm going to talk to you in a bit more detail about exactly what psychoeducation means. I'm then going to, before I talk to you about the course content of taking control of your mental well-being, I'm going to talk to you about the benefits of having people undertake this training in your organisation, and what that means to the business when people do start to take away and put into practice some of the knowledge and skills that they learn when they attend the course that I'll talk through. Then a course overview as it shows there, and then I'll finish off and wrap up talking to you about what delegates get to take away with them to be able to put into practice, and I'll wrap up talking about the CPD accreditation that this course attracts, because it is CPD accredited with the CPD Standards Office here in the UK. Okay, let's have a look at psychoeducation then. So, psychoeducation, as I've said, is a term that is starting to get more talked about, in particular when it comes to corporate well-being and that encouragement of encouraging individuals in the workplace to start thinking about looking after their mental well-being in a more proactive way. I'm going to put some things up on the screen. So you remember when we were at school, you remember the topic of physical education when we were at school, known as PE, when we attended school. Essentially, when it came to physical education or PE in school, it was about instilling within us knowledge and a skill set to understand that if we look after our physical health, that in turn is going to be beneficial to us as we go through this thing called life, because we're going to keep ourselves more fit and healthy when it comes to our physical health. Psychoeducation is essentially the same, but psychoeducation is focusing on our mental health and our mental well-being. And the bottom line of psychoeducation is essentially a set of life skills that if they're in place and a person actively puts those into practice, they're going to be able to thrive at life. However, when some, if not all of these skills are absent, individuals, people can really struggle with life, and in turn that can start to have an impact and a detrimental effect on either or both their physical or mental health. So psychoeducation is important. You will start to hear this phrase an awful lot more when it comes to the workplace. This is about empowering employees within the organisation. This is about encouraging ownership for employees to take ownership of their mental well-being, well, their health overall, to be honest, both their physical, but here we're going to be talking more and directing it more towards their mental well-being, taking that ownership to look after it. And in turn, when mental well-being is looked after, that gives an individual more resilience, more mental well-being resilience to be able to go through this thing called life and manage the ups and downs of everyday life. Okay, another benefit when it comes to having employees undertake this training is it has a direct impact on the organisation. And some of these benefits that an employer can gain from individuals undertaking this course means that employees start to have more competent life skills, and they are more likely to take ownership and actively engage in looking after their well-being. And when they do, that means they will have a healthier work-life balance. That will follow through. This is spoken about as part of the training and encouragement for individuals to think about and start living a much healthier work-life balance. When this starts to happen, there's an improvement in mental health, there's an improvement in physical health, and overall benefit in the company. This means that there's a reduction in absenteeism, less people off work, and there's a reduction in presenteeism. So you might not have heard of the term presenteeism. Presenteeism is essentially when you have somebody off work because they're too ill to work. Presenteeism is where the person feels that they need to come into work, but they're not really fit to be undertaking the role that they're employed to do. And that's what we mean by presenteeism. The Health and Safety Executive have now reported that for every one individual you have away from work due to absenteeism, you will have 2 people within your organisation who are there under the term presenteeism. So it's 2 for 1 when it comes to this ratio. That will be reduced if we are encouraging employees to look after their well-being. There'll be increased productivity. If a person is looking after themselves, both from a physical and a mental health well-being perspective, they are more likely to produce more when it comes to their job role and their workload or their work schedule. You'll have improved customer service, so this benefits the organisation again. You'll have reduction in staff turnover. Staff turnover is one of the biggest costs that a business can encounter. So when you have a big turnover of staff, you've always got that process of advertising, that process of recruitment, that process of selection, of offering of a person coming into a new job role, that steep learning curve where that person gets up to speed. It comes down to the bottom line of a cost to the business. So it is far better to keep the members of staff that you've got. And if you can do that and support them effectively, and particularly when it comes to their well-being, and encourage that they look after their well-being in a proactive, positive way, then across the board you will have a healthier workforce, which in return means you will have a healthier business. And of course that then increases employee engagement. So then that increases the loyalty that you will expect to attain from your workforce as well. Okay, I'm going to talk you through the contents of the course. Now, the course itself, just before I make a start on this course overview, it runs for 3.5 hours. However, it can be delivered over 2 90-minute sessions, or it can be delivered over a half-a-day session with a break in the middle of it. It can be delivered face-to-face, or it can be delivered online. There's 8 sections that we cover in the course, and then there are takeaways that delegates, we run through those exercises in the course itself, but then those exercises are taken away for actions for delegates to put into practice on a day-by-day basis. So the first section that we covered then is what is mental health. Surprisingly, a lot of people are really unsure as to what mental health is and means to them on a day-by-day basis and what it means in everyday terms. We investigate how people can, or look into how people can monitor their own mental health status, how they can score it, how they can tell where they sit with their mental health status, and if necessary, if that mental health status is starting to move, and in particular into a more negative perspective, that they can take proactive action, because this has been noticed and observed. Take proactive action to pull that status back up into a more positive situation. So they can recognize the changes within themselves. Why? Because they know how to do it. Essentially, when it comes to our mental health, it's how we think, it's how we feel, and it's how we behave. And we look at that in detail so people are more aware of what that means to them. We then look at the ebb and flow of life and what can influence our mental health. We look at this from a risk perspective. We look at this from a protective perspective. And when we look at this, it's essentially a balancing act. So we delve into this so we are more aware that on a day-to-day basis, we are mindful and reflective, the individuals are reflective, that they can spot that if they've encountered more risk that day that could potentially impact their mental health or mental well-being, that what they're going to do is take counteractive measures to offset that. And so what it does, it keeps this resilience, this suit of armour of mental well-being resilience protected as we go through this thing called life on a day-by-day. We then look at a thing called a mental health continuum. Here, this demonstrates the fluidity of our mental health. And we can sit in 4 quadrants when it comes to our mental health status. And so we look at this in detail. And so we look at this, are we sitting with positive mental health with no diagnosis? Have we got poor mental health with no diagnosis? Do we have poor mental health with a clinical diagnosis? Or indeed, do we have positive mental health with a clinical diagnosis as well? So we look at this in some depth and get a better understanding of what fluidity can look like. And then from an individual perspective, we've got more of an idea of where our mental health status sits, where we sit on this continuum, and what type of action we need to take to keep ourselves, if at all possible, in a positive status when it comes to our mental health. From here then, we move on to the topic of stress and really get a deep understanding of what stress is all about. Surprisingly, people, when it comes to stress, we know the symptoms of stress. Absolutely we do. We know the symptoms we experience when we get overwhelmed, or if we're acutely facing a lot of stress at any given moment. We know those symptoms. However, a lot of people really don't understand why we get stress, where stress comes from. For example, what it means, the signs of earlier warning stress, for example, some of our earlier warning signs, and how to take positive day in, day out action to manage stress rather than allowing us feeling overwhelmed and the stress managing us. Because what can happen is, if we leave stress unmanaged, we will often and regularly hit our emotional snapping point. And if that happens on a regular basis, this can start to have a massive effect on both our mental and physical health. So this is about re-establishing, first of all, our knowledge of what we understand stress to be. And then when we get a better understanding of what stress actually is, it's then figuring out and starting to understand how do we go about managing stress within ourselves on a day-to-day basis. And this is what we look at in section 4 in the course. And we then undertake an exercise, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what that exercise is towards the end of this session. Now, if this was a 90-minute session, we would wrap up that 90-minute session here. Or if it was a half-day session, we'd go into a break at this point, and then we'll return after a break, or we'll return for the second 90-minute session if we were doing it in 2 halves. And the next topic we would cover would be work-life balance. This is where we really dig down and start to think about what's going on in our lives individually. This is down to reflection, which is such an important life skill that a lot of us don't undertake. Putting our foot on the brake of life, sitting back and evaluating where we are at this moment in time. And part of this is what's going on when it comes to our work-life balance. So we look into this. We look into when we consider what our paid work is. We look into this when we consider what chores are, because they're part of work as well. And also then on a week-by-week, month-by-month basis, how much time do we set aside with intention to do this thing called life and partake in the life element of it, because it's that life element that will give us a lot more of the protective factors that enable us to get through this thing called life and the ups and downs of life. So we have a really good look at thinking about what our work-life balance looks like. We look at what an unhealthy work-life balance looks like, what a healthy work-life balance looks like in this section. And then we give delegates some tips to take away, to consider about putting into practice so they start to more proactively engage in undertaking a better work-life balance. We then move on and start thinking about intrusive thoughts. Staggeringly, excuse me, as individuals, humans, we have on average 60,000 thoughts a day. And never before than we are in this 21st century where we are now towards the end of 2024 have we ever had more intrusive thoughts than we do today in this modern world. So we really start to think about what our thoughts might look like, what they are, what types of thoughts we're having. What those thoughts are based on. Are they based on actual facts or emotional facts? We start to consider putting into practice low-level cognitive behaviour therapy on a day-by-day basis. Cognitive behaviour therapy historically is used by, in particular in the main, by the National Health Service, but it's used by an awful lot of other counsellors and therapists as well. But it's a framework that's used to help support people recover back from poor or ill mental health. But the new thinking now is, from a proactive perspective, we should be thinking about putting some of these CBT, these cognitive behaviour therapy skills, into practice to use when we're using it in a proactive way rather than a reactive way. Because if we do, once again, it's going to give us more resilience. It's give us a thicker suit of resilience to be able to do this thing called life. So we start to think about low-level CBT. And putting that into practice. We use a thing called the ABC model that we look into in detail in this training course as well. So once again, delegates can take away tangible things that they can start to use and put into practice. The next section of the course, we talk about sleep. It's one of those topics where when you look at the statistics and dig down into it, astonishingly, a lot of people do not get the right amount of sleep on a daily basis, and they don't get the proper quality of sleep on a daily basis. And we spend a third of our life doing it. So it's really important that we get a good understanding of what sleep is, what it's for, what it does for us when it comes to our health and our mental health in particular. We look into this section and think about how we think about getting a good quality night's sleep. What cycles we sleep in, what our sleep window is, for example, and what our sleep hygiene is. So essentially, once more, the delegates take away some education and they take away some things to consider to put into practice so they can improve that area of their life as well. The last section that we cover on the course is self-care. Self-care is so important, and that we encourage individuals that we take ownership. There's a big word that I've been using all the time throughout this overview presentation, but it is about this encouragement to take ownership, to start to consider as an individual of looking after ourselves from a self-care perspective. And self-care is about how we can proactively support both our physical and our mental health on a day-by-day basis. We look into and delve into what we currently do on a week-by-week or a day-by-day, week-by-week, month-by-month basis to look after ourselves. And then we look at a thing called the 10 keys to happier living. And these have been set out that if we can think about self-care and what activities we undertake, if we can try and draw down from these 10 topics of these 10 keys of happier living, then that again is going to work to our advantage. So we look at that in a lot of detail. And what we do then is as an exercise created off the back of this section where we start to create a self-care plan, which I'm going to go into details about in a moment. And so we begin that in the course, and then that's for the delegates to take away, start to put into practice, and then fine-tune that as they're going along and seeing how that fits and how that works into their current lifestyle. So these are the 8 elements of the course that we go through. There are 3 main takeaways that delegates take away when it comes to exercises that we undertake. The first one I spoke to you about is a stress management exercise. In this part, what delegates are encouraged to do is empty their mind of whatever they're stressing about currently. And whatever that may well be, getting that down on a piece of paper and then asking themselves 7 questions about that list of stresses they are experiencing. This is about stress management, this exercise, and this is about taking control of the things that are, if they can, of what's stressing them. Yeah. And then putting into practice good self-care for the things they can't take control of, because they know that what they're experiencing stress-wise from that, if they can't change it, then what they're going to do is manage the stress that they get from the things they can't change. So they're encouraged to undertake this as often as necessary when it comes to managing stress. And the aim is that rather than having to grab a piece of paper each and every time they undertake this exercise, this becomes second nature, and this starts to be done from a thinking process and from an internal process. So stress management becomes part of the person's day-to-day routine without necessarily having to think, I need to get it all out on a piece of paper, because it's actively being managed internally. The next thing when it comes to an exercise to take away, this is a thing called the weekly wellbeing checkup. I said earlier, it is so important for us as individuals to put our foot on the brake of life at times, sit back, reflect, and ask ourselves questions about where we're at with things and what's going on, and evaluate and see if things are working for us when it comes to looking after ourselves from both a physical and a mental health perspective. And the weekly wellbeing checkup is a great way of making that happen. It's essentially 4 questions with some sub-questions sat underneath it, but I'll run through the 4 main questions. The first one is, where's your mental health today? Yep, and getting yourself to check in with that. The next one is asking yourself the question, are you looking after your well-being? Make you sit up, take notice, and be observant. The third question is about how your thinking is today. So remember, we spoke about intrusive thoughts are spoken about in the course, so we check in with that as part of this exercise. And the last one is about the stress container. How full is your stress container, which is the exercise I've just been detailing and I've been talking to you about. So as I've said, there's some sub-questions underneath that, which I won't go into now, but this is another delegate takeaway that happens when they attend the course. The last takeaway that they get is about creating that wellbeing plan I've just been speaking about. So this is about creating a start point, what we do on the course, of creating a plan, seeing what that plan might look like, and how we can get those attendees to start to commit on a week-by-week basis to thinking about how they can do a nice, healthy work-life balance, and when they do the life part of that work-life balance, that they're doing things that supports and looks after their well-being. And this gets incorporated into this plan. So things such as things they like to do to keep well, that starts to get included. Things that they must do. There's things that they like to do, things that they must do. 2 very important differentiations in those questions there. It's about setting out goals. It's about understanding what triggers might come along on a day-to-day, week-by-week, month-by-month basis, and when a person is triggered, what that response will be. It's about preparation and being prepared. So we delve into this in a lot of detail, and this can change. This plan, it is a fluid plan. What might work for an individual today might not be working in 6 months' time. So this plan is organic and it's going to move and it's going to be fluid and can change over time. So they're the 3 takeaways. Now, as I've said to you, this course is approved by the CPD Standards Office as having accreditation. It's 3.25 hours of continual professional development. So that it's been overviewed, it's been assessed by an independent body, the CPD Standards Office, and accredited and given a value of what it's worth to the individual that attends it. So I know this offers an awful lot of value sometimes to organisations when they look at this and go, actually, this must have some decency about it when it comes to a course because it has that accreditation that backs it up. Okay, folks, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to sit through and listen to this presentation. It's gone on a little bit longer than I anticipated. It's coming up for 26 minutes now. Here's all my contact details if you want to reach out and you've got any more questions or you'd like to know more about the course itself. When it comes to people being on the course, I cap it at no more than 30. The reason for that is just ensuring that I can ensure everybody has the same quality of learning experience. So I go from 8 to 30 delegates on it, and as I said earlier, it can be delivered face to face or it can be delivered online, and it can be either 2 parts or it can be done as just short of a half-day course. So you've got my email address on there, you've got my mobile number, the YouTube channel that I've got on there at Peter Abbott Training. There's other overviews of other courses that I offer on there, so please, if you feel like having a look at those, have a look at those. I'm on LinkedIn if you'd like to reach out and connect with me on there, and you've got my website as well. Okay, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.